Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 12 of the Lost One podcast. Joining me today, we've got Shoshima1016,
Yo.
and we've got Haseo,
Hello.
who's filling in for Samurai today because Samurai lost power at his office.
Yeah, like two cities lost power.
And as you can see, Haseo is super well prepared, which is why he had sound on his phone.
I was trying to turn the sound off my phone because I forgot to disconnect my earbuds, and all of a sudden it turns the power way up on my phone.
Yeah.
Oh no.
So anyway, as you can tell, professionals here. 12 episodes in, and we're still not ready, despite ample time and being late to start, and all sorts of other fun stuff. So anyway, welcome. If you stuck around for 12 episodes, bless you. We really appreciate
who
you.
sneezed?
Yeah. But, I just got done playing Cult of the Lamb.
Oh.
So, I'm in a blessing mood,
There you go.
as the cult leader blessing my followers. Although I'm not really much of a cult leader here, but, that's another story.
I don't know. It depends on what the subscribers say.
Yeah, right? If you haven't, by the way, please check out Cult of the Lamb. It's a lot of fun. I think you guys will enjoy it.
I've only heard good things about it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And I think it's only the special edition is worth only $30. So,
Yeah.
And I think the base version is $25. It's worth $25, and I would just pay the extra $5 to get the DLC stuff. So anyway, shilling for a game, not sponsored. But so today we're gonna jump back into Lost in the MCU. We're actually gonna complete Phase 1 today because the last movie is, of course, the Avengers, the big one.
The big one.
In many ways, it was the make or break moment for the MCU, and we'll talk a lot about that as we get in. But hilariously enough, this was the first MCU movie I missed the midnight release for.
Really?
Yeah, out of the biggest one, you would think, I would make it, but no. The problem is that I was attending college at the time when it came out.
Oh, okay.
And the buses stopped running.
That's right. I remember you telling me about that.
So it was okay, and it was towards the end of the year, so it was final season because I believe it released in May of 2012, and so it was I was basically I only had one opportunity to go, and then I was nope, I have to pass my classes. So.
Yeah, I bet that's a little more important than a movie.
A little bit. So it was funny because I'm such a huge MCU fan. I had seen literally every other movie. I'd been to every other midnight release at the time. I had not missed one, and all of a sudden, real life hits, and the first one I missed.
And this is the before times when they actually did midnight show.
Actual midnight releases rather than 8 p.m. releases.
They've been at 7 recently.
Yeah. Well, it's been selling creeping earlier every year. It feels like
just like Black Friday.
Yeah. Or Christmas. I mean, Christmas is now officially starting November 1st, apparently. So.
Yeah.
I refuse to let that happen.
No, I agree. But if you just go into any store, the day after Halloween, they've got their Christmas decorations.
No, I actually remember going on Halloween.
Yeah.
And it was Halloween night, and they were putting up Christmas stuff, and I'm like,
yeah, but they were putting that up for November 1st, so my point still holds. But yeah. Anyway, but yeah, so I ended up missing the midnight release. I ended up seeing this with my mom, actually. My mom took me to see this over the summer. We had a cheap theater in our hometown, and we basically got to see it for $10, which was pretty cool between the two of us. So, and I think that was the only Marvel film I've seen in theaters with my mom. So that kind of made it kind of special because she's not the biggest superhero fan, but the fact that she was willing to go see it with me, and yeah, it was a pretty big deal.
Very side tangent. They were apparently renovating that theater, and from the pictures that I've seen, it looks amazing.
Well, that's cool, but let's not talk about that because we don't know very many people listening to the podcast who live there. So we'll talk about that another time.
Yeah.
But yeah. So anyway, what about you guys? When did you see the Avengers? Did you guys catch it in theaters or did you catch it later?
I know it was in theaters. I'm pretty sure it was the midnight release. I mean, I'd only imagine.
It sounds like what we would do.
Yeah. So
midnight release and then struggle at work the next day.
Seems legit.
Yeah, sounds about right. But yeah, so Avengers obviously was a really big deal. It was not necessarily the first time that an extended universe has come together, but it was the first one done at this scale. Certainly with all these different blockbusters, and certainly by bringing in the stars of all these other movies to interact together for the first time on screen.
But yeah.
And when I say other stars, I don't mean just a ensemble cast. Obviously, that's different. This is stars of other movies now appearing in one movie together.
Yeah, not
and,
just...
and they're playing the same characters.
Yeah.
And I don't think that had ever been done before prior to the Avengers, or if it had, it definitely didn't have the level of success that Avengers did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there we go.
And I think we've all seen where the MCU is today. We're at the end actually of Phase 4. As the time of this recording, Black Panther is coming out in about 2 months. So we're recording at the end of August right now. And Black Panther Wakanda Forever is the last film in Phase 4. So we are approaching the end of Phase 4 in the MCU, which is cool because once that's done, then we can talk about it here on the podcast at some point. So,
Yeah.
We obviously had a whole lot of copycats. Sony tried to mimic it with Amazing Spider-Man starring Andrew Garfield. We all know that Fox tried to do the reboot with X-Men First Class, which was kind of a reboot, but not really. And then they did the weird thing with Days of Future Past, where they combined the two.
Yeah.
To make it even more confusing.
Yeah.
And then
it wasn't a reboot, but then it was.
Yeah, and then Deadpool also takes place in the X-Men timeline somewhere.
But then erases it.
Yeah, and so there's all sorts of weird stuff. And then, of course, we all know about DC. I had that rant about that a couple episodes ago, so we won't dive into that again. But, of course, DC was also trying to build their expanded universe around this time. And, they were all basically realized they missed a trick, and we're trying to catch up. And
yeah.
And
I mean, in DC's defense, they tried the most as far as building the expanded universe compared to Fox and Sony.
That's also not really saying much, though, because DC really only gave it 3 movies.
Yeah.
Whereas Sony gave it 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then Fox gave it, 1.5, kind of.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying it's a big bar.
Yeah.
What about the horror cinematic universe they're trying to do? The
Oh,
Universal
God.
one?
So the Dark Universe,
Yeah,
and that came much later and didn't even make it past its first movie.
Yep, its first movie killed it.
Yeah, and at least with
No,
all
I think
the
it was its second one.
no, it was its
No,
first.
there's only one movie.
It was The Mummy starring Tom Cruise, and it bombed horribly, and they pulled the entire Dark Universe because of it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I watched Matt McMuscles has commented on that,
Yeah,
and there's even the tweet of everyone in the picture.
Yeah.
Because there's Tom Cruise, Johnny Depp, who was supposed to be the Invisible Man.
Yep.
Kurt Russell, and I forget a couple other big list A-list celebrities.
yeah.
And they had literally the one tweet from that account
And
for the
that's
Dark
it.
Universe, and that's it.
Yeah, because they pulled it immediately because The Mummy bombed so badly, and it was, in fairness, a terrible movie. But yeah, it's definitely one of those things where the Avengers, we've seen the impact, we've seen the cultural rise. The MCU is now the juggernaut, the only, I would say, individual who even compares to the likes of the MCU cast now as far as just star power and box office power on a regular basis is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. He's pretty much the only actor, I think, who consistently has levels of success that are comparable to the MCU.
So Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson now is playing Black Adam versus the entire MCU.
Yeah, well, I mean, given what happened with what's going on with Warner Brothers and Discovery, I am really hoping that Black Adam is a success. But given that they have a pretty all-star cast in that too, I mean,
yeah,
the 2 headliners are Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and Pierce Bronson. So, it's okay, you've got 2 bona fide superstars.
Yeah.
And star power, again, as we've talked about with DC, has never been the problem.
Correct.
It has always been the writing. And The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, recently went on public record in an interview and said that he was the one who argued for the Shazam and Black Adam movies to be split. So Shazam obviously didn't suffer for it because Shazam was one of the better DC films, I think.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed Shazam.
So did I. I would rank it probably number 3. I'd probably put it really close with Aquaman.
I don't think I've seen Shazam.
It's really good if you get the opportunity. You should definitely watch it.
It has the dude from Chuck.
It does, which
Oh,
is a
really?
bit weird, but
Because that dude's fucking built in that movie.
but he makes it work.
No, he does.
Yeah, he's very good, and so yeah, and then obviously we'll see what happens with Black Adam, but Black Adam, I think, will be kind of the first real test to see if this creative decision to separate Shazam and Black Adam will work in their favor. So, fingers crossed. Again, I don't hate the DC extended universe. I certainly don't hate the DC fans. I just look at Warner Brothers Discovery and go, what the hell are you doing on a regular basis?
Hey, look, I mean, they separated Venom from Spider-Man. Like, what's the worst that could go wrong?
Well, that was Sony. So
I was just joking.
But yeah, and Sony unfortunately can't seem to make a film franchise, at least for superheroes, without Kevin Feige, and it's unfortunate.
But it's Morbin time.
I mean,
we are not going to turn this into another like 20-minute rant. So say your piece and
I
we're
was
done.
gonna say, I mean, I have faith in Dwayne the Rock Johnson. I mean, he made me like the Jungle Cruise movie, so I mean, he has skills.
Oh yeah, well again, it's like I said, it's not
carry it.
It's not the star power that's the problem. With
Yeah,
DC,
he can only carry so far if the writing still sucks butt.
Yeah, like even like again, it's kind of like what Will Smith was at the peak of his career. Obviously, pre him slapping Chris Rock and destroying his reputation, but like even a bad movie, Will Smith would still do a good job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
The Rock is kind of the same thing, even though The Rock only plays like a handful of characters. But again, he's really good at those characters. So for what it's worth, but.
Anyway, back to the Avengers.
Yeah, so as you can see, like, just by our brief kind of sidebar there, the Avengers had a big influence across Hollywood and popular culture. And of course, across the fandom. It really helped revitalize Marvel. It established, I think at this point, Disney had already purchased Marvel. But,
yeah,
it basically just, again, reinforced that the mouse will rule us all.
Yeah.
And,
I have kids. I can agree.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it was a huge success, and we'll kind of dive into what made the Avengers such a huge success. But again, like real quick, like obviously I'm raving about it. How do you guys feel about the Avengers?
all right. So now it's not one of my favorite films, but I want to say at the time it probably was my favorite. Not DC.
Of the MCU films?
Yeah, MCU.
How about you, Shoshima?
Yeah, no, I really liked it. I mean, I think even in hindsight, you just have to look at like what it did and the precedent it set.
Yeah.
For future films. I mean, just watching the way they made the heroes fight each other, and it made sense in the movie. It wasn't just like, let's just make them beat each other up. We could sell more toys. Like, the story was good behind it yet, too.
Yeah, which is also, funnily enough, a pretty common trope in comics is in every team up, and this is the case for DC, Marvel, and non-DC or Marvel properties, there's usually some sort of misunderstanding that causes the heroes to fight initially, and then they have to, like, team up and defeat whatever the threat is.
Yeah, but I mean, and with how well that worked, you can see it happen in like subsequent Avengers movies.
Yeah, absolutely. And
I mean, Civil War was not Avengers. We call it Avengers 2.5.
Yeah. Because Winter Soldier was Avengers 1.5.
Exactly, but it just spawned just that trope in the MCU of making a reason for them to beat the shit out of each other.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And and again, the MCU, one thing they've done well is they've actually made it work within the movies. Like it's not just out of nowhere.
One thing the Avengers did do for me is it made Cap look really cool, like on the level of maybe like Iron Man or Thor.
Yeah.
Like watching the original Cap movie, you're like, okay, cool. He's like a really strong dude.
Yeah, he's a really strong dude. He's a super soldier. He's a soldier.
But he's still a person.
Yeah.
But then watching him go up against Iron Man and Thor in this movie, like you can see, like he's there for a reason.
Yeah, and I mean he even takes on Loki too, who is like quite literally a god. So
yeah.
But yeah, it's fun because this movie, and one of the things I don't remember, I think it might have been the Ringer podcast, but I was listening to a review of the Avengers several years ago, and something that stuck out to me is one of the things that works in this movie is that all of the characters still feel like themselves.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't really any strange deviations. There isn't like, as we often see in like a lot of media, for example, in order to create conflict, they'll have a character do something that seems super out of character or repeat a mistake that they should have already learned by now.
Mm-hmm.
I
just to make it work in the movie, yeah.
Or in the TV show, like
yeah.
The example that jumped to me is like Barry Allen in The Flash, right? Like in the Flash TV show, and like this is not a knock on Grant Gustin at all, but a lot of his problems seem to be like he's going to do the thing and then he has to relearn a lesson that he learned last season. Like it was like his first like 2 seasons he trusted the wrong mentor. Like his mentor turned out to be the villain.
Don't you think it'd be pretty suspicious after the first one?
Exactly. Like, and they kind of play with that a little bit, but not really.
Yeah, especially the Flash being a smart person too.
Yeah, like he's a genius.
Yeah.
So that's, again, it's like it feels super counterintuitive, and they have to kind of like make them do dumb decisions in order to forward the plot or create conflict. And there isn't really any of that here.
No. They brain control Hawkeye so that it makes a reason for him to do what he does.
Yeah, and it also started, by the way, this is the movie that starts Hawkeye's legendary winning streak.
Yeah.
So for those that don't know, Hawkeye, in every team up with the Avengers, if he's missing, the Avengers lose. If he's there, they win. Every fight. Hawkeye is like undefeated in the MCU. It's really impressive.
Hawkeye is the best.
Yeah, he's always just.
Wait, was he there when Thanos?
No, he wasn't.
Okay.
No, he was not there.
No,
he was not there.
And then in the next one he's Ronin.
Yeah, well, I'm just making sure.
Yeah,
because I'm like, wait, was he there?
Yeah, there was no Hawkeye.
No, he wasn't. No,
okay.
he was there in Endgame when they beat them.
That was the missing stone they needed. They needed the Hawkeye stone.
They needed the Hawkeye stone. Yeah, so
that's why I'm like, okay.
Yeah, but yeah, you look at like his winning streak, and like here in this movie, right, when he's brainwashed with Loki and his team win. They scatter the Avengers. They kill Coulson. They steal the
that Coulson scene just
and then when he obviously when he gets restored and they go in the battle in New York, the Avengers defeat Loki.
Mm-hmm.
Then you go into Age of Ultron. Avengers win against Ultron. He's also notably the only Avenger who doesn't fall victim to Wanda's manipulations when the Avengers get their ass kicked, so he's still undefeated there. And then in Civil War, he's on Team Cap, and Team Cap ultimately ends up being right.
Mm-hmm.
So they win that. They throw the fight in order to win it. So, he didn't actually lose. He just,
He just lost on purpose.
Yeah, pretty much. And then you have, and then, of course, in Infinity War, he wasn't there, and Thanos wins. And then in Endgame, he's there, and the Avengers win. And we're going to end there because we're not going to cover anything in Phase 4 right now. But, yeah, he has this, like, legendary winning streak where, like, he's literally, like, never lost.
And you know what? I'm not even mad.
Yeah, the side that he's on has never lost.
Yeah.
So it's pretty funny. It's like, yeah, Hawkeye is the most powerful Avenger.
Doesn't Hawkeye have, like, in the comics, like, he's so accurate it turns into a superpower or something?
Yeah, so Hawkeye...
Or they blame it on a superpower?
So the thing is that in Hawkeye's writing has been pretty inconsistent at times, like a lot of comic book characters who have been around forever.
Yeah.
But at one point, yeah, his accuracy was essentially a superpower.
I know there's been times where, like, he's blind and he's still shooting those in there.
Yeah, so he has, like, they've done, like, where he's deaf. That comes from the comics. He gets blinded in certain timelines. But, yeah, I mean, basically, like, there are certain comic books and storylines where he does not have where he does basically have a superpower, and that's his accuracy and his ability to, like, pinpoint. He has, like, super vision, super, like, control over his reflexes, that sort of thing. But traditionally and more recently, no, he's just...
Yeah, no, that's why I said in the
he's
comics.
just pure skill. And, but yeah, it's, again, it's like in even, like, Black Widow, who's also considered in some ways to be the other, like, pure skill member of the Avengers, right? Who doesn't rely on, like, weird tech or mystic powers or super soldier serum.
Yeah,
even in the comics, like, Black Widow in some iterations was given a version of the super soldier serum.
Okay.
So, like, even she's like, Hawkeye is quite literally usually the normal dude in because he's not super smart, he's not super rich, he's just really skilled. And it's like, okay,
he's just good at what he does.
Yeah, he's very good at what he does. And they do explore that a bit in the MCU, but again, like, Hawkeye's legendary winning streak starts here.
Yeah.
And
what also starts in the Avengers is just them showing how they can shuffle all these different characters and give them all screen time.
Yep.
I don't think any character got, like, more stream time than another one, or screen time.
Yeah, well, they did, but, like, it was all comparable, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, like, Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man has, like, the highest screen time, like, in the first 3 phases of the MCU, and I think that's the case. But he was also their biggest star.
But, I mean, you get the other characters in, you don't feel cheated.
Yeah, exactly. Like, every character gets a chance to shine. and even Coulson, who at this point has largely been comic relief or kind of like the viewer perspective, kind of like Watson plays for Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
You know, it's Coulson even gets kind of his moment where he, makes the ultimate sacrifice.
Yeah.
And, basically, if it wasn't for Loki being an illusionist, he might have actually had Loki on the ropes, like with his gun.
Yeah.
And then he still gets the final word on Loki, which is pretty impressive, even as he's dying.
Yeah. No,
so that's what it does.
Coulson's great, and that whole scene, it just pulls on the feels.
Yeah,
It just
strength, yeah.
it builds up the motivation to go kick his ass and avenge him.
Yep.
And yeah, Coulson, through his death, made the Avengers in the MCU.
Yeah, and it's also really good because in that moment, kind of like we said about juggling characters, it also shows Fury's subterfuge, which as a spy in the head of S.H.I.E.L.D., you would expect him, where he basically set it up to where like he put fake blood on Coulson's Captain America cards, and then Maria Hill, after the Avengers are motivated and ready, are like, weren't those in his locker? Like he didn't have them on them.
Yeah, minor details.
Yeah, but again, it's like that's Fury kind of like using his skills as a spy and in deception to give them that push, as Fury calls it.
Yes.
But let's kind of start from the beginning, right? We've kind of highlighted some of the stuff, including Hawkeye's legendary winning streak, but let's kind of like break down what makes this movie work. And in my opinion, it starts off immediately. It picks off from the end credits of Thor, where Fury asked Eric Selvig to help them study the Tesseract. And the Tesseract, which we don't know it at the time, is the first Infinity Stone. That hasn't been released yet, but it is in fact the Space Stone.
Yeah.
And then we're also introduced to the Mind Stone in Loki's scepter here. So we can already see the seeds of what would become Infinity War being planted even as early in Avengers, when the MCU wasn't even sure whether or not it was going to make it. Because this was their make or break movie in a lot of ways. Like Iron Man was their first one. But then it was, can they take that next step with the Avengers?
Yeah, and it was subtle enough. If they don't do it, they didn't like ruin anything.
Yeah, exactly.
But then in there enough, if they do it, like
they've
people
already,
who know,
they've already planted the seeds. So it's there, and we open up with, of course, Fury, Coulson, and Maria Hill working with Selvig and Hawkeye as they are experimenting with the Tesseract. Loki, Tom Hiddleston, comes out, wrecks S.H.I.E.L.D., brainwashes Hawkeye, Selvig, and several other S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, and escapes, ultimately.
And destroys the headquarters.
Well, that was actually with Fury. That was Fury's tactic, is he was stalling by removing the Tesseract. It was going to implode, and he was trying to stall to bury Loki and everyone else to make sure that Loki doesn't get the Tesseract.
Yeah.
So, of course, what do? They have to call them the big guys. So Coulson gets Stark, Natasha Romanoff, who is getting interrogated, and this is the way you introduce a badass, like, spy, is her getting the shit beaten out of her by a gangster, and then effortlessly beating the shit out of them as soon as she gets called out. Like, just this is how you introduce a spy, and,
Not to mention putting on what would be one of the hardest targets.
Yeah, and then of course she gets Banner, aka Hulk, where Mark Ruffalo's Bruce Banner debuts. After Edward Norton's negotiations fell through, Ruffalo took it up, and of course he has been a part of the MCU ever since. We talked a lot about his role in the Hulk podcast. But,
my understanding, or did I mention it in the Hulk podcast?
You did, yeah, about Norton. Norton it was money, and then he had scheduling conflicts.
Well, then he actually offered or like suggested Ruffalo.
He did, yeah, because they were friends, and Ruffalo, as we know, has gone on to kill it.
Yeah.
His most recent
honestly, like hindsight, like it'd be weird having Norton now. Like I know we saw him in the original Hulk, but like seeing what Ruffalo has done like for the past 10 years.
Yeah.
Like it's hard to imagine a different Hulk.
It really is. And like again, we will never know what Norton would have done, but Ruffalo has really made the role his own. And he has done it in a wide variety of situations, whether it was in the Avengers here, where, everyone kind of like with the replacement of James Rhodes, it was like with Don Cheadle for Terrence Howard. was kind of like, okay,
Yeah, not Cuba Gooding Jr.
how is he?
Sorry.
Come on, man. I'm shocked Samurai has not brought that up more often. But
Well, he's not here. I had to do it for him.
Okay, fair enough. But so it's kind of like, how will this replacement actor work? And obviously Don Cheadle has become an amazing part. I think he really sold a lot of the stuff like in Civil War, for example, and his performance in Endgame and Infinity War was also really good. So, and then of course he ended up winning, like, I think he got nominated for like an award because of his like 2-minute cameo in Falcon and the Winter Soldier in Phase 4. And Don Cheadle, in true fashion, when asked, "How did this happen?" He's like, "I have no idea. Please give it to somebody else." He's like, "I didn't." He shows up for like 2 minutes. He has like a conversation with Sam.
Yeah.
It's like heart to heart, and that's it. Like, that's it. So it's like, okay, and he doesn't appear again. Yeah, so, but Ruffalo, as we said, he really makes this role his own, and I just want to also mention something. She-Hulk is currently airing right now.
Yes.
As we're speaking. I think episode 3 debuts
tomorrow.
Tonight at midnight, so tomorrow.
Sorry.
But
it just says Thursdays on Disney+.
Yeah, so today's August 31st, Wednesday, August 31st. But they finally do address, I'm not going to say how, but they finally do address the whole actor switch in She-Hulk. It's very subtle. You might not catch it, but they do address it. 2? Yes.
I did not catch it.
Yeah, so...
I've watched episode 2.
I haven't been watching it, but I saw like articles like, oh, they finally kind of explained why it happened.
Well, they didn't explain why it happened. They just literally addressed it. And again, we won't talk about She-Hulk, but look for it. It's there. It's very sneaky. It's very quick. You won't catch it.
It's very sneaky, because I have kids and I missed it.
Yeah.
Well, I also have kids.
Yeah. But... Anyway, Ruffalo comes in, and of course, we see a little bit of Natasha Romanoff. Obviously, people are still afraid of the Hulk. S.H.I.E.L.D. has been giving him space, which is why we haven't heard anything about Banner for, at this point, 4 years, because I think Incredible Hulk came out in 2008. But yeah, it was, we haven't heard anything for Banner in 4 years, and find out that he ends up, he's trying to help people. He gets tricked by a little girl that Natasha used to get him isolated on the outside of the city. We get to kind of see how aware Banner is. He fools Natasha and basically calls her bluff on, "It's just you and me," by pretending to get angry.
Yeah.
And, you see kind of that fear, right, in Natasha Romanoff, who we had just seen in her last appearance. Just
decimate a crew of guys.
Yeah. And, after, by the way, getting interrogated.
Yeah.
So, forcefully. It was, really good to kind of show, like, just the effect of Hulk on...
Yeah, they built...
a super spy.
Yeah, her up, and then showed you just how good, or not good, but
how scary Hulk could be.
And I forgot that the MCU movies used to take place in the year that they actually came out in.
Yeah.
They
still technically do because of the snap and the time skip.
Oh, did it catch them back up? Is that what it was?
It's currently Avengers Infinity War took place in the MCU in 2018, and a 5-year time skip in that in Endgame took them to 2023.
Yeah.
So they're still like in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're they're a couple years ahead.
Now we're gonna catch up.
But in fairness, like, we would have been, assuming COVID hadn't had all those delays, it would have still been
a little ahead.
Pretty close. So they're technically, it's, they're still within the timeline, but right now it's like 2023, 2024 is where most of them are taking place. I think there might even be some that are taking place in 2025, but I haven't looked at the timeline in a little bit. So,
and then obviously there's the ones that's supposed to take place previously, still take previous, like
like Captain Marvel's a big one because it's a prequel.
Yeah, Black Widow.
And Black Widow is another one which took place in between after Civil War but before Infinity War.
Yeah.
So then it switches over, and there's Captain America getting the debrief, and he basically doesn't know what to do. As you can imagine, he's a man at a time. But he's still trying to be that soldier and that good man. And, he tells Fury, like, you should have left the Tesseract in the water.
Wasn't it, this movie where he just beats the shit out of that punching bag?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you think about it, he lost his best friend. He lost his love of his life, Peggy Carter, and then he woke up at a time, 70 years in the future.
Yeah, 70 years later, yeah.
So, he's frustrated, as you can imagine, and, he doesn't really have anything to do. So,
I don't think nobody blames him.
Yeah. But they send, they send Captain America to go after Loki when they find him. And, obviously they introduce Captain America to Bruce Banner and Natasha Romanoff. And Coulson gets to kind of geek out over meeting his hero, Captain America, making it pretty awkward. I watched you when I sleep. I mean, I was there while you were sleeping. I mean, Coulson is all of us. He really is. And, it's kind of fun because, they think they're on an aircraft carrier. And there's a really funny moment, in my opinion, where Cap tells Fury, at this point, I don't think anything would surprise me. And then when the helicarrier
lifts up.
$10 says you're wrong. And then it lifts up and Cap just walks over and silently hands Fury $10.
He does hand it over in every.
Yeah.
Not to mention, for Cap was a lot more money because when he went under $10 was a lot.
Yeah, for sure. But
boy, take your hat off. This is $1.
So there's a pretty fun moment where Cap gets to go one-on-one with Loki, and it's Stark of course comes in and Loki surrenders, which of course we end up knowing is a plan.
Yeah.
Right, it's all part of the plan. And in the meantime, Stark and Rogers kind of have a little bit of an ego clash. Stark obviously being a lone wolf, and as we find out later, having some resentment for Rogers because Howard literally ranted and raved about Rogers the entire time, and so Tony's a little jealous and not that impressed with Cap. Obviously, Thor shows up, and they have Iron Man and Thor, start duking it out because Tony is like, hey,
well, because they both have huge
egos.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Yes.
It's electricity, but that works too.
But so they end up fighting, and then Cap, of course, jumps in between it and plays mediator. But so that's the first fight we get to see between heroes is Iron Man versus Thor.
I'm surprised they've actually never done that again. Because Thor hits him with the lightning or whatever.
Oh, they do that again.
Where it uses
overcharges.
Yeah, they do that in Endgame. Thor, hit me.
Oh, yeah.
As you can see, Haseo is a master of the MCU and remembers every detail.
That was a great moment. Yeah. And then Thor hitting the vibranium in the shield.
Yeah.
And just leveling the whole force, and Cap's like, that was weird.
Yeah. Well, then Cap's like, are we done? And at that point, everyone's kind of like, okay, let's calm down. But you see, very quickly, even they start to argue almost immediately. Cap... Tony, of course, shows up to kind of explain what, Loki's trying to do, talking with Banner, and of course they bond over both being super geniuses.
Yeah,
and
they bond over science!
And Cap is like, I don't understand a word of this.
I didn't either, by the way.
And, Fury and, basically has to tell Stark to, I think it's Maria Hill tells Stark to, when did you become an expert in thermonuclear physics? Last night.
Yeah. There was a bunch of internet memes with that.
Yeah, and basically, Tony, of course, who doesn't trust S.H.I.E.L.D., rightfully so, doesn't trust Fury, plants a bug, downloading all of the data, and Cap is not thrilled about that, because Cap, his whole thing was, we have a mission, follow through with it. He has the soldier's mentality. That, of course, clashes with Stark, who's an egomaniac, independent,
lone wolf type.
Lone wolf billionaire. And, who doesn't play well with others, his S.H.I.E.L.D. psych evaluation coming into play.
Yeah.
And it's, basically, it takes Banner, who, Cap does get along with a lot better, because Banner gets along with pretty much everybody, to kind of point out to Steve that, hey, it's a bit weird, Tony's the only one in, arc reactor technology, so if they wanted to do this, why didn't they bring Stark in? And then it's like, why now?
Mm-hmm.
You got to admit this feels a bit weird. And, Steve, of course, puts on the, just find the cube, find Loki. And, or rather find the cube because they already have Loki captured.
Yeah.
And, but then Steve, of course, who isn't super great with computers and probably doesn't understand a lot about it.
Well, in his defense, computers were hardly a thing back then.
They weren't a thing, yeah. Not modern day computers, certainly not the level of the MCU technology. But
I think that they were ones that used to take up a room back then.
yeah, but he ends up doing some snooping himself because he can't shake what Tony and Bruce have told him.
Yeah.
And
no, Cap, I mean, while he disagrees with Iron Man, he can still like agree that he brings up a good point.
oh yeah, well that's kind of the foundation of their whole relationship is that they are friends,
But they don't disagree on a lot of stuff.
They're polar opposites in a lot of ways, and that's part of, I think, to kind of talk about what makes this movie work is, again, these characters don't just get together and team up. You have personality clashes, you have ego clashes. The fight between Thor and Iron Man is a great example of that, where like
they have huge.
Thor has such a huge ego that he like immediately goes in and tries and captures Loki, even though he's in Iron Man, Captain America, and Black Widow's custody at this point. But Thor sees it as an Asgardian matter, which totally makes sense from his perspective.
Yeah, in his perspective,
and
it
Tony
makes sense.
is like, what the, like,
he's like, dude, we already had him.
He was ours. We got him first. Like, you didn't do your job.
Yeah.
So both characters have very understandable perspectives for acting the way they do. Same with Tony and Cap clashing and arguing, and Bruce even like kind of like he doesn't really want to get like involved at first, but then Steve kind of like calls him out on it and is like, I want your opinion on this.
Uh-huh.
And, of course, you're not going to turn down Captain America, so Bruce is like, yeah, don't trust S.H.I.E.L.D. Like, don't trust them. Like, I'm here to do a job, I'm here to help, but I don't trust him. And, that's enough to convince Steve. So it's fun because while this is going on, we also get to see Black Widow shine. When she outsmarts Loki in this interrogation to figure out what his plan is. Because Fury doesn't like it, Natasha doesn't like it, Steve doesn't like it. The only one who's like, oh, it was that easy because I'm just so great is freaking Tony.
Well, yeah, he's.
But no one else really, knows why it was so easy. And Natasha figures it out. He wants to unleash the Hulk on the helicarrier, which would be disastrous.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Hawkeye, starting his legendary undefeated streak, comes in and basically does just that.
Yeah.
He leads an attack on the helicarrier, ends up freeing Loki, unleashing the Hulk, separating the Avengers, killing Phil Coulson, and gets knocked out by Natasha in the process.
Mm-hmm.
So, But setting the stage for, this kind of ultimate coming together moment. Because again, like we say, they didn't just come together naturally. They had to earn it. And they had to lose something in order to realize that we can do this together.
Yeah. Which is a common trope in storytelling.
It really is, but that doesn't make it any less effective.
No, it was very effective, yes.
So, and of course, we already talked about, the Fury moment where he rallies them together.
Yeah.
And, surprisingly, it's funny, too, because this goes, again, we've kind of given Stark a little bit of shit so far with his portrayal.
Because, only a little? I'll do better.
Yeah, but we really see that out of everybody, the two that are the most upset are Thor, because Loki murdered Coulson right in front of him, and, surprisingly, Tony, who, throughout all their interactions, his name is Agent, like,
yeah.
Why is he Phil? Never really gave Coulson the proper
He
respect.
almost didn't treat him as a human being until he died.
Yeah, but then you see that underneath it all, Tony is really upset about it. Probably more so than anybody, probably save Thor. And again, it's like, we're not soldiers. He angrily tells Cap, we're not soldiers. But he still is willing to go fight for Coulson and work with the others, put his ego aside. And
avenge him.
Yeah, and avenge him, exactly. And
I get it.
He's then also brave enough or angry enough to have a one-on-one conversation with Loki, knowing very well that Loki could probably tear him in half if he really wanted to.
But we have a Hulk.
Yeah, we do have a Hulk. And we also get to see...
That scene was just great, though. Just Iron Man strutting into his own house, by the way.
Yeah. Offering Loki a drink.
Because what was it? He came in and did his armor he took his armor off, right?
Yeah, well, because his armor had been damaged
Oh,
during the attack on the Hellcarrier. Because remember, there was the scene with where Hawkeye, when he started the attack, he blew one of the engines. So if they lost a second one, they were going to drop.
Yeah, and
so they had to get that one going again. And
to get that,
it appears
he
to
spun
run
the turbine and he got hit by it.
Yeah, and Cap. It appears to run on some sort of electricity. Well, you're not wrong.
No way.
But yeah, there was some.
Yeah, I just couldn't remember why he lost his armor, but just struts
it
into
was
his own house.
Yeah.
That a self-proclaimed god is in right now.
Yeah.
And then offers him a drink, like, bitch, I don't care.
Well, the best part is Tony realizing that Loki's just like him.
Mm-hmm.
Like
an egotistical
he's
maniac.
No, this was about making a statement. He wants an audience. He wants to put in a building with his name on it. Son of a bitch.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, though, we had seen prior to this and we found out it was the Mind Stone's influence aggravating everybody because they were all Fury comes in and, Natasha comes in and demands to remove Banner right after learning the plan. And Banner's like, what the fuck? You asked me to come here.
Like, you're the one that brought me here.
And then, Fury comes in because he sees that Stark hacked into his system and is like, what the fuck? And
hey, but he caught somebody playing Galaga.
He did, but that was before he hacked him.
Yeah. I just wanted to bring that statement up.
Yeah, but... so Fury comes in and is like, Stark, what the fuck? Like, why are you looking? And they're like, we're just waiting for it to align. But in the meantime, what's phase 2?
Yeah.
And then, Cap comes in after doing his snooping. It's like, it's weapons. Like, they're using the Tesseract to make weapons. And then it's like, Fury's like, well, the reason why we're doing it is because Thor came in and blew up a town. Like,
we're doing it because he did it.
Yeah, well, no, it's like,
No, I know.
It's the old arms race philosophy, right? Like, when you meet an opponent with superior weapons, you have to match those weapons, you get annihilated.
Mm-hmm. No,
obviously, we know Thor's a friendly, but Fury's super paranoid. He's not going to trust that.
But he's a friendly and has those powers and weapons. But who knows who else has stuff like that?
Exactly.
So I get it.
Yeah, so, and then, of course, it comes down to, Stark and Cap are arguing.
They always argue.
Yeah, but I mean, this is where it starts, though. Like, really. Like, we saw a little bit of the clash earlier. But now it, like, fully erupts where, like, literally, Cap insults Iron Man and says, you wouldn't be the one to make the sacrifice play. You always have to have a way out. Like, and then,
Yeah, hindsight.
Tony, well, then Tony, ends up saying, everything, you weren't special. Everything about that was in the super soldier serum. There's nothing unique about you. And obviously, as the films would go on, in this very movie, Tony would make the sacrifice play. But of course, he would make the ultimate sacrifice in Endgame, proving Steve Rogers wrong that he would, in fact, lay on the wire to let someone else cross over.
Yeah.
And, of course, Steve ends up being able to wield Mjolnir, which proves that he is, in fact, very special.
Very special.
So, proving both of them wrong. But it gets very heated here.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we move on to the Battle of New York, where the Chitauri force invade, which Rocket Raccoon will really dunk on the Avengers and the Chitauri later by saying they are the weakest army in the galaxy. Literally, you just blow up their flagship and it wipes out their entire army. And Tony's like, well, we didn't know that.
Can I just say I love Rocket?
Oh, Rocket's great. Yeah. He's fantastic. And we'll talk a lot about Rocket Raccoon when we do Phase 2. With Guardians of the Galaxy, but the Chitauri obviously is the invading force. We know what happens. The Avengers reunite, come together. They defeat the Chitauri threat and Loki, capture the Tesseract.
Puny god.
And Hulk beats the ever-loving shit out of Loki in Tony Stark's own home, in his Stark Tower.
That scene. Oh,
he just disgraces Loki.
He does.
And Tom Hiddleston
sells it perfectly. Yeah. And of course, we get the end scene of them eating shawarma.
just Iron Man's just laying on the floor like, fuck me.
Yeah.
Let's go get shawarma.
Pretty much.
And everyone's like, seems legit.
Yeah. But
yeah, can I just say the Avengers, like the movie, doesn't do anything like crazy different or crazy good. It just does everything very, very well.
Yes. I would in fact argue that the Avengers is either the best of the Avengers films or the second best one. Depending on, how you feel about Endgame and Infinity War, because those two while they are standalone stories, they're so interconnected, it's hard to separate them.
And then just, if it wasn't for the original Avengers, those wouldn't be as good, and nothing else would have came.
Nothing else would have happened.
Yeah.
If they had bombed, if they had made the mistake that DC's Justice League did, or even Batman vs. Superman, or Sony's The Amazing Spider-Man 2 did, or X-Men's Apocalypse did, we could be looking at a very different reality. But the fact of the matter is that everybody in this movie, every actor, the writers, the director, and unfortunately Joss Whedon has since been revealed to be a huge piece of shit. But just the props, the special effects, all of it came together to form one of the best movies of all time. And in a way that really established truly the MCU as this is a force. Because we already had some runaway successes with Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man. But Avengers put the exclamation point on it.
Yeah, the way Avengers brings it all together into just this single crazy Omega package is just...
And it's great because it plants so many seeds for the future. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. will go back to the Avengers multiple times. Iron Man 3, which will be the first movie in Phase 2, will really highlight the effects of the Battle in New York and Tony having to face an entire alien army that he never knew existed before. He'll have to face that reality and teaming up with gods and super soldiers
and nearly killing himself.
Yeah, and literally almost making that sacrifice play when the Fury ends up in a super badass moment using a rocket launcher to blow out a Quinjet. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was pretty dope. He just hand me my rocket launcher.
Yeah, but it's pretty great because just everything in this movie comes together and the actors do such a great job. Robert Downey Jr., of course, he's the all-star of this movie. He's really the glue in a lot of ways. Mark Ruffalo has an incredible debut where he just fits in. He slides in so seamlessly with all these other characters, and he immediately forms a bond both with Natasha and with Tony.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic. And of course, we even see Cap respect Banner. Then...
Yeah, can I just say, I'm just thinking about the scene right now where he looks at Cap. Or was it Cap or Iron Man? No, it was Cap, right? And telling him secret.
Oh, yeah, that's my secret, Captain. Yeah. I'm always angry.
I'm always angry. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it right
now. That delivery was
incredible.
The
scene. Because, his delivery was great, but just also all the CGI, with the Hulk and just utterly...
The Hulk transformation and then literally punching the giant Cathari worm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it all comes together wonderfully. And... Then, of course, you have Scarlett Johansson, who plays an incredible Black Widow, who has an amazing, obviously we had seen her in Iron Man 2, but she really gets some spotlight. Jeremy Renner is Hawkeye, again, starting his legendary winning streak here.
Well, I feel, to bring it back to Black Widow, in this movie, she got to be more badass, not that she wasn't a badass in Iron Man 2,
but she was undercover. She was undercover for the first half of the movie, she wasn't the focus.
Undercover / I don't know. I don't want to say sex symbol, but
she was.
Okay, well, I was trying to,
No, but you're. I think you're accurate to say that. Tony's drooling over her the whole movie.
Which who wouldn't? I'm just saying.
But here it's she's not just sexy. She's also extremely good at what she does.
But they make her just sexy, but then just more badass than just sexy.
Way more badass, and they kind of throw that trope in there, right? Because again, we even opened up she's literally getting interrogated and she's getting punched, but it turns out she's interrogating them.
Yeah.
She could have broken out at any time.
They were playing her game.
Yeah, but they didn't even
playing her. Yeah.
But they didn't even realize
she was playing 200 IQ 4D chess.
Yeah, pretty much. And she's not even a super genius.
No.
So, she's not like T'Challa or Tony or Bruce.
Is T'Challa a super genius?
He is in fact. Well, so in the movies, he's still considered he's not as smart as Shuri. Shuri is like one of the smartest people.
Yeah, I'm just saying in the MCU.
But T'Challa's still smart enough.
Yeah.
And he's still in comic books, he's a super genius.
Yeah, I mean he's smarter than the average man.
Oh no, I'm not saying he's an idiot.
There's a literal line in Avengers.
Because the average man is an idiot. Just throwing that out.
Yeah, in Avengers: Earth's Mightiest Heroes, the cartoon, there's a line with Tony and T'Challa where how did you I'm curious how you got to learn my systems inside and out. And T'Challa's response, I studied them inside and out. And Tony's like, what?
Like,
you broke
Seems
through,
legit.
you broke into my system and disassembled and put it back together? Like, that's the implication there.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, traditionally, like, the big geniuses, the titans in Genius are Tony Stark, Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic,
Mhm.
T'Challa, and Bruce Banner are, like, the four main ones. There's other super geniuses, of course, but, like, those are, like, the four big titans.
Yeah, no.
But in the MCU, obviously, they made Shuri the super genius. But we'll get to that when we cover Black Panther later. But, you know, again, Black Widow really gets to show off kind of her street smarts.
Mhm.
And, you know, the concern even with, like, Hawkeye, because Hawkeye spends the first, like, half of the movie as a villain. Like,
Yeah.
the biggest
just
issue...
a brainwashed drone, almost. you
Well,
know?
so I'll never forget the biggest concerns, because, you know, we really didn't get to see a whole lot of, like, Hawkeye and Thor. He has a very brief cameo there, and he only has, like, a handful of lines. So, but he comes across, like, kind of bland.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the biggest criticisms about Jeremy Renner is that he's bland, and obviously we've seen in subsequent appearances that's not the case. But turning him into a villain was one of the best things they could have done for the character, because out of all the Avengers, he had the least screen time.
Yeah. So no one had, like,
Definitely.
a super attachment to the character
So-
as far as...
Yeah, so what better than to literally show him being the deciding factor in the Loki's master plan? Like,
I mean, good thing it was Hawkeye. That's why he won.
yeah,
If
I mean,
it was
exactly.
Natasha,
I-
I don't know.
I mean, as we've established, Hawkeye is undefeated.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
Hawkeye had been on the Avengers, Loki's plan wouldn't have worked, and he would have been
Obviously.
trapped, and the movie would have sucked.
Mhm.
But yeah, you know, Clark Gregg as Phil Coulson was incredible. You know, Chris Evans as Captain America. We haven't really talked a lot about Thor, but like the emotion and the range that we see from Chris Hemsworth Thor in this is far more extensive than what we got to see in his movie,
In his standalone, yeah.
where, you know, we get to see him frustrated and him celebrating, and, you know, his anguish. Like, he really helped sell Coulson's death, and
Mhm.
that's something I don't think Hemsworth gets a lot of credit for. And, you know, he won't, unfortunately, in the MCU for another 2 movies. Unfortunately, because even his appearances in Dark World, which is universally, I think, considered to be one of the worst, if not the worst
It's
MCU
in
film.
the lower echelon, that's
and,
for sure.
and
Yeah.
Age of Ultron, which is also considered to be in the lower echelon.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why.
I don't know. Age old.
We,
It has Hulkbuster. That's all I need.
we can break down why when we talk about Age of Ultron, but Age of Ultron is generally considered to be one of the lower tier.
I'm not trying to disagree, but it has Hulkbuster,
Yeah.
so I don't care.
But even in though, like, he's very rigid and doesn't get to really show off his range, and unfortunately, he really doesn't get to do that in the MCU until Thor Ragnarok.
Yeah.
But
Anyway.
Samuel L. Jackson is always
Oh.
solid. Colby Smuthers, who plays Maria Hill,
Mhm.
was great.
Can I just say, because I watched a decent amount of How I Met Your Father.
Yeah.
So
Or
then just-
how you met your mother, you mean?
That's what I said.
Yeah.
Clearly.
Yeah,
Not the other one that they've remade that I've watched too.
Yeah, okay.
But How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah.
And just seeing her as Maria Hill, like, I know you.
Yeah.
And you are not a superhero in that show.
I mean, technically, she's not a superhero here either.
But
yeah.
she's badass in this.
She's
film.
extremely badass, and
Like-
and she like Maria Hill has a certain attitude about her,
Mhm.
like a no nonsense. Like, she's kind of the straight by
Like,
the
yeah,
book.
she's the serious one.
Yeah.
When you have Samuel motherfucking Jackson
Yeah.
next to her,
and
she's the serious one.
and she just she does a great job. You
Yeah.
know? And it's just in her, and again, she doesn't have like a whole lot of, you know, like lines and a
You know,
big role,
And also,
but she really makes the most of every scene she's in.
yeah, not being a super comic book fan, is she a big part of the comics?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like there's several storylines where, like, for example, when Fury goes missing, like, she's literally Fury's right hand.
Yeah.
She is the most trusted agent outside of, like, Phil Coulson.
Okay.
And Phil, remember, made his comic debut much later. He originated in the MCU and then was brought into the comics.
Yeah, he was one of those,
But-
like Harley Quinn.
Yeah, but with Maria Hill,
She was in the comics before the
way
movie.
before,
Yeah.
Okay.
and there's stories where, like, she becomes director of S.H.I.E.L.D. and
Okay.
she's way less friendly and accommodating to the Avengers.
Yeah, no
because-
offense, I just had no idea.
No,
No,
she plays a huge role in the comics and in the history, and she is basically Fury's, like, most trusted individual. Like, Fury doesn't trust very many people. It's like he trusts, like, Captain America, and he trusts Maria Hill, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, he doesn't trust Iron Man.
Yeah,
Fuck that dude.
no, he definitely does not trust him. But yeah, it's and she really makes the most out of every scene she's in here.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where, again, like you just look at this cast and it's like brilliant cast, great writing, wonderful action scenes and CGI. Really, the entire cast and crew of this movie needs to pat themselves on the back, and they can basically rest on their laurels and say, we made one of the greatest movies of all time, and we brought comic books to mainstream.
Yeah.
Like, we made comic book movies.
Oh, there's no
mainstream.
question. I mean, that's why I would say Avengers, the first Avengers movie, is one of the greatest Marvel movies ever, just because that is the one that brought it to the mainstream.
It really did, and again, it was a lot of people don't know, because we look at the MCU now and we're like, oh my god, like everything they put out is pretty much gold with the exception of Inhumans.
I mean, Eternals, I wouldn't call it gold.
I mean, I think the Eternals is still great, so I know that's maybe not the most popular decision, but like it's still to me it's like Pixar. The worst MCU film is still better than a lot of other it's still a good movie.
Yeah.
So,
no, I'm not saying it's horrible, but
it's long.
When we talk about it, we can go over it more.
We'll talk about the Eternals a lot in the future and like what they did well, what they didn't do well, because it is not a perfect movie.
Slash what they could have done better.
Yeah. Maybe some suggestions, but again, important. We're not movie critics. No. We're also not directors or anything, but obviously
I'm the average man,
opinions.
An idiot.
Yeah. So, but yeah. But anyway, so that's kind of a we've talked a lot about it. We're actually about an hour in, and Haseo really hasn't gotten to talk a lot. So Haseo, what is like your highlight for this movie?
For the movie, it's definitely more towards the end. I mean, the fighting, that scene where the camera goes in and does that whole spin. And I know now it's played out.
Yeah.
But when they did that, it was like,
oh, you're talking about the slow-mo spin?
Yeah, the slow-mo spin where they're on that bridge or whatever, and then like the camera comes down and pans around all of them.
Mm-hmm.
That was literally like that holy shit kind of moment. Like everyone in the theater was applauding. And they made sure to make it long enough to know that people are definitely going to be applauding during this part. So we got to make sure it takes a while before it dies down.
Yeah.
And I remember that was one of those iconic shots. Like, oh man. Yeah. Like now you look at it, like everyone does that in any movie or anything like that, even if it's like a one shot. Like,
yeah, but just to kind of add to your point, Avengers earned that.
Yeah, not disagree,
because they didn't like force them together. It was it felt natural.
Correct.
So it was earned.
And that's what I'm saying. Like that's what gave it that oh my god moment vibe thing. Because again, they did it, and I think they did something similar to that in Justice League. But they just.
Justice League did not earn it, unfortunately.
Yeah, correct. Like,
and
even in the Snyder Cut too, when they did that, it's like, oh well, I mean, yeah.
So another question for you, Haseo, and then we'll get on to you, Shoshima. We'll get your 2 cents in here too. But like, who would you say is your MVP of this movie? Because there's just so many like stars, and you can be the actor, it can be the character. Like, who do you think is your MVP for this movie?
Again, Robert Downey Jr. He did
that's a good
because this not only, because this is what his third outing as
Tony Stark. Yes,
Tony Stark, but this is also a man that was literally almost considered a dead guy in Hollywood.
Yeah, just washed up.
Which is funny because I was just watching this video. So he did Iron Man 1 and they did Tropic Thunder.
Yes, he did do Tropic Thunder.
Oh, God. Yeah.
I was watching a video last night.
What do you mean, you people? What do you mean, you people?
Can I just say, like, Tropic Thunder nowadays maybe shouldn't exist?
No.
But I love that movie.
Correct. And in the video I was watching, like, hey, what do you think about it? You got you got Iron Man acting in this movie.
Yeah.
But this was, this was Tony Stark when they had just taken a major gamble on him.
Mm-hmm.
Notice I stopped saying Disney because I don't think the first Iron Man was.
No, it was not.
It was.
Yeah.
And obviously, after Disney took over, he couldn't be doing movies like Tropic Thunder.
Yeah, I mean, Tropic Thunder is one of those movies that unfortunately doesn't age well. And even at the time, it was very controversial.
Correct.
Yeah.
And Robert Downey Jr. didn't want to do the role at first. They really had to convince him.
Yeah, I don't really want to talk too much about Tropic Thunder because we are at the end of the podcast. But basically, long story short is I think every one of us agree that, like, that is not a movie that would be made today.
No, that's why I wanted to start. It shouldn't exist today.
Yeah.
But
it's not
I did enjoy it.
Made today, but
at the time.
Yeah.
And, no, again, that's part of growing up, right? Because when that movie came out, we were, like, 17 and 18, I think. So, yeah. So, But anyway, so yeah, Robert Downey Jr. I think that's a good MVP. Thank you, Sam.
Like I said, he was just coming off a very turbulent time in his life, and he just came back and dropped hit after hit after hit with his character and with his acting. And so it's like he definitely put a lot of effort into his movies.
Yep, absolutely. He sometimes giving someone a second chance can work, and we've seen that with RDJ. So same question to you. What was your highlight, and then who's your MVP?
Oh, my highlight.
Yeah, highlight of the movie.
I mean, yeah, I'd have to say MVP, probably Iron Man. The writing, helped with that. He was not the center, but I mean, 51%, or however you want to phrase it.
Yeah.
Had the majority. Highlight. Oh, my highlight was after the big battle, and Thor and Hulk took out all the enemies.
Oh yeah.
And then just Hulk's like boom, and Thor just leaves the screen. I swear it was like one frame. You didn't have time to see Thor leave.
Yeah, it was pretty great.
Just gets knocked the fuck out.
Yeah, the theater erupted in laughter when that happened. Yeah.
That if I had to pick a scene, that would be it.
Hey, that's a great one. So I'm actually gonna be, I guess, the lone dissenter here, because while I agree that Robert Downey deserves it, I gotta give it to Mark Ruffalo.
I can't argue that.
Because for me, I think at this point, I expected Robert Downey to do great because I had seen him in his first 2 Iron Man.
He's done good in 2 movies already.
Yeah, so he was kind of this, in my opinion, he was the glue, and he still crushed it in Avengers. He crushes it every time he plays Tony Stark.
Yeah.
But for me, Ruffalo was coming in off of what many would consider to be the worst Phase 1 movie. He's taking the shoes of Edward Norton, who was probably the best part of the Hulk film.
And I feel Edward Norton's a more A-list celebrity compared to Mark Ruffalo.
Yeah, especially at this time. And so for me, for Ruffalo to come in, and for him to just slide in so effortlessly,
seamlessly,
and have instant chemistry with every cast member, and to just own the role the way he did, even in this movie. His transformation that we kind of skipped over, but when Loki's plan succeeds and he's trying to resist the transformation, and he gives Natasha that look before he turns into the Hulk.
Warner.
Yeah, and just he was a perfect cast, and he also, in my opinion, has the highlight, which for me is. That's my secret cap. I'm always angry.
That's another good one.
And so for me, it's Ruffalo. He because again, for all the other actors, we had seen them at least in some
where
capacity.
this was his first movie.
You talk about sink or swim.
Yeah.
The only other actor who was comparable, in my opinion, was Jeremy Renner, because Renner only had a small cameo in Thor.
Yeah.
But Ruffalo is coming in without even that experience.
Yeah.
And to me, it's just, he comes in and he crushes it.
Yeah.
Every line he delivers is great. Even he has the little mannerisms down where RDJ offers him the blueberries, and he just kind of okay, I guess I'll take it. And that was all improvised, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's something that for me, just again, Ruffalo is, in my opinion, the MVP of this movie. And he doesn't have quite as large of a role, and he's not at the forefront, but he comes in, he holds his part, and in many ways, I think, over-delivered on expectations for him coming in. So that's my 2 cents. But again, it's not a knock on anybody. I think you could make an argument for pretty much everybody, but I do feel the front runners are either Mark Ruffalo or Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, I mean, the writing just sets RDJ up.
Or I want to say maybe the third runner for what made these films so great. Tom Hiddleston just.
Yeah, I mean that's also, I think, a really good argument, because to this day,
true,
Tom Hiddleston's Loki is one of the only, aside from Josh Brolin's Thanos.
Yeah.
He's really the only villain that casual fans look at and go, yeah, I remember him.
They specifically made him stick around.
Yeah. They didn't kill him off like they do with every other villain.
And when they did, they still didn't.
There are very few villains who have survived, and we talked about this a bit, but the Marvel villain problem will really rear its head in Phase 2.
Yeah.
And you can kind of excuse it in Phase 1 because, as we've talked about, the future was kind of uncertain about the future of the MCU. But at this point, the only surviving villains are Abomination, who literally does not appear again until Shang-Chi.
Shang-Chi / I had to remind my wife that he was in Shang-Chi while we were watching She-Hulk.
Yeah. And then he will play a big role in She-Hulk, which we won't talk about why, but like that was announced. That's public information.
No, that's why I just want to leave it there.
But yeah, he and
He's
Wong.
in the arena with Wong.
He and Wong are duking it
right.
out in the fight cage.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that's his next appearance. You know, literally almost 10 years apart.
The
over
thing
10
is,
years
in
apart.
Shang-Chi, I don't think they even say it's Abomination.
Yeah, they Wong calls him Email, which is his name. So they identify him as Abomination.
But they don't say the word Abomination.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think
they don't call him Abomination, but he's clearly there. And Wong calls him Email.
Yeah,
which is Emil Blonsky. So
no, I knew that's who it was, but I'm just confirming. They
don't address him by name. I don't think.
Yeah, and that might be.
But that's why it was a cameo. So
yeah, no, that's why I'm just confirming for.
Also, Phase 4, Phase Wong confirmed.
Oh my God, Phase Wong.
We are gonna I don't know about you guys, but I'm gonna fanboy over Benedict Wong and Wong. When we get to Doctor Strange, I'm gonna fanboy over him. So just a heads up to everybody, be prepared for Shenzo fanboying over Wong.
Be prepared.
Yeah. That's Jeremy Irons, but anyway, so yeah, but Loki, that's a really good point to bring up, Haseo, is that
well, I mean, on most movies in general, if it doesn't have a good villain, it can get pretty bland.
A hero is only as good as his villain. And that's part of the reason why Spider-Man and Batman's rogues galleries are so good, because they have such depth.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk a lot about Spider-Man's rogues gallery when we get to No Way Home.
Oh, that was.
But it is something where there are very few superheroes who can have an Avengers style movie by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And Spider-Man and Batman are two of those, if they're done correctly.
Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, to Haseo's point, to your point, Shoshima, Tom Hiddleston's Loki is a perfect foil, and he's a fantastic villain. He will continue to play a role in the MCU moving forward.
Yeah.
And now, you look at the villains at this point. Ironmonger was killed, right? He died.
Killmonger, right?
No, Ironmonger. Killmonger is Black Panther's villain.
Who's Iron?
Yeah, Jeff Bridges. Obadiah Stane.
Oh God!
Tony!
Oh God!
Yeah,
so
Jeff
long.
Bridges.
Yes, no, it all came back to me.
Jeff Bridges.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bridges, yes.
So Obadiah Stane gets killed. Abomination gets locked up. We already talked about he survived, but we don't see him again until Phase 4. He literally does not appear again until Phase 4. So he's kind of out of sight, out of mind. Then you have Whiplash and Crimson Dynamo, that combination, played by Mickey Rourke.
Yeah.
He gets killed.
Yeah.
Then you have in Thor, Loki, obviously, who survives.
Yeah.
But
Thor was weird because it didn't have a total main antagonist.
Well, they did. It was the Frost Giants, but Loki ends up being the final antagonist. But it works.
It works, but it wasn't centrifugal force throughout the whole movie.
No, well, his subterfuge was there the whole movie, but it wasn't apparent, that he was going to be the main villain because they also had the Destroyer.
Mm. Yeah, there was a lot of other stuff.
But yeah, Loki is the villain in Thor. And then in Captain America, we have Red Skull, and Hugo Weaving, as we talked about in the Captain America podcast, will not reprise that role. So Red Skull basically gets taken out, and we don't see him again until Endgame, or rather Infinity War, where he's played by a different actor.
Yeah, which we went over last podcast.
Yeah, which we did talk about. So you're looking at all these villains, and it's okay, so you could have argued that they put Abomination and Red Skull away, but Hugo Weaving had made it very clear he didn't want to return.
Mm-hmm.
Abomination was tied up in the legal challenges with Universal due to the Hulk properties. And so it was really, and then you killed off both Iron Man villains, so by the time of Avengers, you only have really one choice, and that's Loki.
Yeah, if they're gonna reuse anyone.
And we will really dive into the Marvel villain problem when we start addressing Phase 3, rather Phase 2 and Phase 3. But ultimately, Loki, Tom Hiddleston's Loki, I agree, 100% should be in the conversation for MVP of Avengers, because the entire movie doesn't work if he didn't do well in Thor, and
he did such a good job at being a villain that you still love the character.
Yeah.
And it's rare to be a villain that everyone's like, yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Well, he makes a very compelling villain.
Yeah. And Hiddleston brings a lot. Like, we talked about, like, his facial expression after the puny god.
Yeah. Well, Loki / Hiddleston's very charismatic to get the audience to love him still.
But it's also like he has that rant, I am a god. His interactions with Tony, the able to exchange with his exchange with Captain America, his one-on-one with Natasha Romanoff. Like, he has chemistry with every person he interacts with.
I know, that's why I'm sad we haven't seen a huge like Spidey and Loki like scene together.
Yeah, which God, I can't wait.
That'll be great.
And when that happens.
The quips.
Yeah,
all the quips.
I'm really looking forward to that. Hi, Tanner.
Quip.
So, Commander Tanner, as you can see, is instructing us that we are going too long. So he's ordering us to.
I do have one more question I'd like to throw out.
Yeah.
So, me still probably being a child at heart, I always, when I watch media or movies, like resonate with like a specific character. I mentioned it last podcast. I started resonating with Thor.
Yep.
In these movies. And so I was just curious with you guys, like if you have any like specific character that you like more / resonate with.
I have one, but
not particularly, like not one stronger than others.
There wasn't like I know like as little kids, it's always like, oh, I want to be this character. Like if you ever play anything or
that's not really me. But funny enough, the one thing I do have is I do wish to see what Ed Wright was gonna do with Ant-Man.
Okay, well, yeah.
But that's very, very different.
So I would say probably your closest one would be Ant-Man.
I guess I just was interested to see what.
To be fair, Scott Lang, the Paul Rudd as Scott Lang is pretty freaking incredible.
Oh, it is.
He's a lot like Coulson, where he's kind of like a shoo-in for the viewer. So I think that's a great choice.
I remember hearing Ant-Man like being Paul Rudd. I'm like, I'm sold.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Paul Rudd's Ant-Man. And then, like, it was supposed to be Edward Wright, like, directing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you still see a lot, like, you still feel Edgar Wright's influence, for sure. But Edgar Wright's big issue is that he couldn't fit in with the Marvel framework. And, that's unfortunate. And that is a problem with Marvel. And we will talk about that, tying that into Eternals, for example. At least with phases 1 through 3, and then some phase 4 films. Yeah. But we'll talk a little bit about that moving forward and like how that's kind of seems to be changing, but that's a whole nother topic. So Haseo took your topic and took it somewhere else, but
as per the usual.
For mine, it's Steve Rogers, hands down, Captain America. I've talked with Vinsanity Puma a lot about this, but I've always been a Cap fan, but I never really resonated with him until Chris Evans.
Oh, okay.
I've always liked Cap. I've always thought he's great. But, like, as teenagers, remember, like, that was Dion's hero.
Yeah.
Not mine. I liked Cap, but I was more partial to Static, but, of course, he's DC. But in the MCU, like, I don't really have a character. Like, Spider-Man probably was the closest one. But here in the MCU, it was 100% Chris Evans, Steve Rogers. And
And honestly, if it wasn't for Chris Hemsworth and the way they portrayed him in the MCU, I didn't like Thor nearly as much back then.
I was never really... I've not really been a big, comic book fan, per se. But I think that a lot of these actors really were spot on. And I can't really picture other people playing some of these. Wasn't Dane Cook trying to do Captain America?
Yeah, we talked about that.
He wasn't here.
I'm just...
We did address that in the Captain America pod,
Chris Evans, Chris Hemsworth as Thor. I'm like, I can't see anyone else do Thor because he did such a good job at it.
Yeah,
especially even reinventing himself in the later movies.
Exactly.
Oh yes. I was not a big fan of the original 2 Thor movies. I thought their movies I just never need to watch again.
Yeah,
I've seen Ragnarok several times, and I'll probably see Love and Thunder several times.
Yeah, there are that is a very shared opinion. I think that the Thor movies again, and like I like them a lot, but I also, you got to remember that I'm like a huge MCU fanboy, so like my opinion does not reflect like
as long as you get something, you're happy.
Yeah, I mean,
know?
I'm also a comic book fan too. So
Yeah.
like, and, you know, I am not the general audience that is aimed at, whereas both of these two are. And so, you know, that's why I like having them on. And same with Samurai, he's also part of that general audience. And it's nice to kind of have like, obviously the super fan, me. I was the one who pushed for Lost in the MCU, but it's nice to have like,
I don't know why Lost. I mean, we're all here.
well, because I'm always lost.
I know,
Never found. But yeah, it's not like it's in my name or anything, or the name
No.
of the podcast or any theme on here.
No,
But,
not at all.
Anyway, enough about that. So to kind of wrap this up, let's do some final thoughts on
Okay.
the Avengers, and you know, just kind of whatever you guys want to say about it. So, say we'll start with you.
Again, solid movie. It's in definitely like my top 10 favorite movies of all time. But that list varies a lot. Cause
Yeah, and it depends, right? Like a lot, you know, and that's fair. But
yeah, but just some of the stuff that's in there is like stuff that people would go for me like, really? Like Shawshank Redemption. That's one of my absolute favorite, probably the top 3. A lot of people wouldn't look at me and guess that.
yeah,
But it's a solid movie. It's again one of those. It was a risk that paid out for them, and it's great.
how about you, Shoshima? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think the Avengers, you know, maybe Martin Scorsese doesn't find it as a very suitable cinematic experience.
That's right.
You know, he's entitled to his wrong opinion.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
you know, maybe it doesn't have like the traditional cinematic like storytelling, like we said earlier, like nothing Avengers does is any crazy different.
No, not really.
It just does everything very well, but it brought the comic books to the mainstream.
Yeah.
You had all the other MCU movies that were good, but this one really just knocked it out of the park and just made it a staple for. It's been 10 years.
Yeah.
And
Well, I mean, 10 years since that movie came out.
yeah, no, for that movie,
Well,
and then
Yeah.
there's no sign of it slowing down.
Like
No.
I remember watching the original Iron Man, and they go like, "Oh, dude, I think eventually they're gonna do an Avengers movie where they're gonna bring in all the." And, you know, that was back when, you know, like, "Oh, that'd be cool if they did that." And then
Yeah.
know, slowly
Like,
see the
and then,
process.
back then, oh, that's a crazy idea. Whereas now, like, no, it's why wouldn't they?
So
Yeah.
I'm really glad you brought that up because that was going to be my final thought.
Oh.
I was going to address that actually, so let's me jump right in. But you got to remember the context of this movie. Superhero movies had been so hit or miss at this point.
Very
You had had some successes, but every one of those franchises ended with a dud.
Yeah, especially after the second or third movie.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And you're looking at like, okay, you know, obviously X-Men was the first one that could tell you could do it. But then, like Haseo said in Iron Man 1, what if they do an Avengers? And then Nick Fury showing up in the end credits scene.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you about the Avengers initiative. Dropping that first teaser,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which set expectations and speculation running wild.
Just rampant. But when the internet was still just in
Like
its
it
infancy
existed,
comparison.
but it's not as
It was
widespread.
developing.
Yeah.
You got to remember, this is 2008. This isn't like 2002. This is when
Okay.
this is when
It was still a child.
this is when the internet is still.
It was a teen.
Well, it was like if it was a baby in the 90s,
Mm-hmm.
right, and then it was starting to kind of the internet bubble crash like at the end of 2001.
Mm-hmm.
But then it was like it was starting to really establish itself. Like YouTube had been founded at this point.
Mhm.
Like Google was already a powerhouse. So like the internet was established.
Yeah.
But it definitely was like, you know, social media was still getting, like MySpace was still a thing at the time. And, you know, it's something that you got to remember in this particular time. This had never really been done before. And it was a make or break it. Marvel had just survived bankruptcy
Mm-hmm.
by selling their other IPs. And if this failed, the MCU comic book movies by themselves would not be at the level they were today.
Who knows where Marvel just as an entity in itself would be?
Yeah. And now you look at it, they're owned by Disney. They are not slowing down. In fact, if anything, they're accelerating. And the problem is now, are they going to oversaturate the market
Which
rather
is
than...
a very valid conversation nowadays.
100%.
And very possible.
But it's, you know, that's now the concern is you went from like, oh, maybe we'll get like 1 or 2 good superhero movies every couple years to now we are getting really solid at worst movies 4 times a year.
That and then, yeah, we can get into it more.
And,
but
and now with
just
phase
there's
4
other
with the TV
medias,
shows
yes.
and the shorts and
there's
I forgot about the shorts. Yeah, those
Yeah.
are things, huh?
so there's all sorts of stuff that the MCU has kind of unlocked. And again, it's motivated Warner Brothers and DC. And again, we know how that ended. It motivated Sony, and we know how that ended. It motivated Fox, and we know how that ended. So it's really set this new like superhero culture, which was already on the rise.
yeah,
But it really, in my opinion, truly solidified superheroes as being not necessarily a nerdy thing that you read in your parents' basement
yeah,
with kids with taped glasses and pocket protectors, to this is now a mainstream phenomenon
mm-hmm.
where it is now cool to like superheroes and
Yeah.
to do it publicly. And to me, as someone who's been a comic book fan and a superhero fan since I was like 4 years old,
Mm-hmm.
it was a justification of all of my fandom.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the first time outside of like 1 or 2 moments where I felt, oh my gosh, they have lightning in a bottle here.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that I was like 17 when it started and I'm now 31.
You're old.
Yes. It's just incredible, the ride we've been on.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that out of all of these films, there's only really been like 2 properties where I'm just like, yeah, that's not been very good.
Yeah.
In
No,
14 years
Overall, they've all been,
is unbelievable.
yeah, it's mainly bangers.
And it's
Couple
something
good,
that,
but most bangers.
I am exactly the type of target audience to where all these oversaturation is not going to bother me at all.
Oh, no, you're not the target audience. They know you're gonna get
Yeah.
stuff in. You're not.
No, but I'm just saying,
Yeah.
like,
No, I know.
I'm not the one they have to worry about oversaturation.
Correct.
I can literally not get enough of superheroes. So,
You say, give it to me.
yes, give it to me! Tony! But anyway, we've been going now for about an hour and 20 minutes. And that's after my edits. So
Yeah.
we're
till
gonna
I
wrap
get
up here. So once again, Haseo has no socials because he's smart.
He's not social.
And
Which is weird because I'm actually one of the most.
I know compared to the 2 of us, but shh.
then we have
They don't.
Shoshima, who you can find at Zachary1016.
Yep.
You can find me at Shenzo the Lost. You can find me everywhere. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this podcast episode. And I also just want to make a quick announcement. I've already talked about this on stream, but this will be the last time for at least a couple episodes you're probably going to see either Haseo, Samurai, or Shoshima. Because as of this recording, the end of August, we are entering busy season for both Haseo and for Shoshima. And so as a result, their availability will probably be pretty limited. Samurai is also busy, as you've seen a couple episodes, and as you can tell by his absence here, he's been trying to get this office space up and running so he can be more consistent and we don't have to deal with those connection issues that plagued us for several episodes.
Doesn't help when power poops out.
Yeah. So in this case, he's going to be taking a little bit of a break just so he can try to get all of that settled and together. But I'm happy to announce that I have scheduled several one-on-one podcast episodes with some of my colleagues, including a very special guest who I'm not going to announce yet because I am still determined not to jinx it until we get a timed schedule down to
So
record.
can I jinx it?
No.
Oh, damn.
But I am really, really looking forward to it. There's going to be a couple really awesome episodes, so there will be a bit of a change in format where rather than we're talking about a subject, I'm actually going to be interviewing my fellow streamers. So please stop by, check them out, listen to their stories, and please continue to support the podcast.
I mean, really, you're just tired of us? So you're saying get the fuck out?
I wasn't going to say that out loud, but yeah, kind of.
Well, I'll say it for you.
I know you will, but no, I'm kidding. Honestly, it's real life is coming up, and I had to kind of make an adjustment on the fly, and it all kind of worked out. So, with that being said, though, my name's Shenzo the Lost. He's Shoshima1016. That's Haseo, very special guest Haseo. And this has been episode 12 of the Lost One podcast, concluding phase 1 of the MCU. Bye-bye!
Okay, bye!